ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि ओम। Readings from Meditation and Spiritual Life. Chapter 17, Self-Surrender. First point, Divine Strength. Spiritual life is meant only for the strong. However, by strength we mean not only physical strength, but also mental strength and spiritual strength. By the exercise of willpower and practice of austerity, one gains tremendous inner strength. But apart from all this, there is another strength, the strength of the divine. The true devotee feels that he is under the protecting care of the Almighty Divine, and he feels infinite strength. Surdas, one of the great North Indian saints of the Middle Ages, sang, "By the grace of the divine youth of Vrindavan, I have understood that Rama is the strength of the weak." Self-surrender to the divine is in itself a mighty form of sadhana. It is not as easy as people think. What people generally can do is to pray to God and depend on Him at different times of the day and offer their body, mind and soul at the feet of the Ishtadevata repeatedly. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, "The Lord dwells in the hearts of all beings and by His Maya causes them to turn round and round as though mounted on a machine, just as a puppet player moves the puppets. Take refuge in Him with all thy heart. By His grace shalt thou attain supreme peace and the eternal abode. Thus has the profoundest wisdom been declared to thee by me. Reflect over it fully and act as you like." When we draw ourselves away from Him, we become more egocentric and fall from the higher path. Instead of taking our stand on the ego, let us surrender to the divine and make Him the center of our consciousness, and then ethical and spiritual life become easy. We should practice prayer, intense prayer, when lower tendencies come up, and then we will find some power coming and lifting us up. Our next point is the blessing of uncertainty. From a spiritual point of view, it is good to remain amidst great uncertainty. It is often good if everything you relied upon is taken away from you and you are left without any worldly support. It is good if all old values, friendships and attachments are broken and you find all that you had clung to disappearing into the blue. It is good that all forms of external consolation, all hopes in other people crumble, for then you will be forced to turn to the divine, who alone is our eternal and only true friend and guide. This experience is very painful, but for many people it is very necessary. Otherwise, they forget God and their own spiritual destiny. You do not know anything about your own future. You cannot rely on perishable things, but that is what people do. Sometimes the treatment is more painful than the disease, but one has to undergo it. The stronger the disease, the stronger must be the treatment. And in the West, this disease of women and gold has become most virulent, so it requires strong injections and medicines. In the case of every disease, there is a curative crisis, and this is a step leading to perfect cure. Sometimes I pray to the Lord to send the devotees misery and trials, to make them suffer and pass through hardships, so that they may come to their senses. Maya is so powerful that people forget all their past sufferings and just go on in their old age. Something is needed to remind them constantly of the divine. All suffering is for our training. Our instincts are to be controlled and burned in the fire of spiritual striving. When the iron rod has become crooked, it needs some hammering. Sometimes in our egotism, we forget that we are delicately poised in between the hammer and the anvil. And so, when the hammer falls, we suddenly wince and exclaim, "Oh, what has befallen me? In the first place, who asked you to get in there?" Suffering need not be on the material plane alone. In the case of spiritual aspirants, dry periods are common when they don't feel the original spiritual fervor, when they find themselves in the dark night. This experience can be as painful as the sufferings of a worldly man. Our next point is egotism, the main cause of suffering. People very often neglect or forget God's grace. They become overconfident in their own strength and become careless. This may even lead to arrogance. There is a funny story in our old books. Once there was a teeny mouse in the hermitage of a sage. One day a cat fell upon it. The sage took pity on it and transformed it into a cat. Then some dogs tried to tear this new cat to pieces, and so the sage changed it into a dog. The poor dog was persecuted by a leopard, and so the sage transformed it into a tiger. But when it became tiger, it wanted to kill the sage himself. Then the sage said, "All right, just be the old mouse again." A similar thing happens in the case of spiritual aspirants too. Divine grace is showered on them, which purifies them to a certain extent, and they are able to attain a certain amount of concentration and freedom. But then they become egotistic, begin to think too highly of their attainments, and become careless or go to the extent of abusing and reforming the world. Then suddenly the grace is withdrawn, and they find themselves alone, facing a terrible void. We should all bear in mind that those who really and truly follow this spiritual path are less egocentric and more selfless, kind, and considerate towards others. We have to be givers and not beggars. When it comes to material things, most of the people are beggars. They want so many things from others, and yet they are egotistic. The less the ego, the greater the joy and peace, and the better our work. Do not think lightly of your spiritual blessings. You need not constantly brood over your weaknesses and past mistakes, but should cultivate alertness of mind. Constant discrimination is essential even in the path of devotion. Constant alertness of mind is essential to profit by the blessings that God is showering on us. As Sri Ramakrishna has said, if you walk one step towards God, He comes to you 10 steps. Our next point is convert suffering into spiritual strength. True devotees of God do not pray for wealth or material benefits. They do not even pray for the removal of suffering. What they pray for is strength to bear their sufferings. There is a fine song by Rabindranath Tagore. Lord, give me the strength to bear thy standard, to whom thou hast been pleased to give it. Give me the devotion to bear the greatest pain that is unavoidable in thy service. Thou mayest fill my heart with great pain. I do not want even to get rid of this gift of suffering that thou art giving me with thine own hands. This misery will be my crest jewel, if with it thou givest me also devotion to thee. Give me work as much as thou likest, if thou dost not allow me to forget thee, nor my heart to get itself lost in the entanglements of the world. If thou wishest, do thou bind me as much as thou likest, but keep my heart open to thee. Do thou not allow me to forget thee on any account. And then there is a beautiful prayer of Kunti to Sri Krishna. O teacher of the whole world, let calamities come to us from all directions, for they enable us to have your vision, which puts an end to the cycle of rebirths. Since we are going to have unpleasant experiences anyway, it is better to have them utilized for higher spiritual life. Nobody can avoid pain, suffering, humiliation in some form or other in his life. As it is, let this guide us to a higher pure purpose. Let us use them as stepping stones to the divine life. This does not mean that we should go out of the way and seek troubles for ourselves, as some people try to do. We should court neither suffering nor pleasure, but seek the divine alone, which is beyond both. Divine grace may not necessarily remove all our physical miseries and sorrows, but if we have the grace, we can pass through the fiery ordeal of life successfully, burning the dross in us in the process. This increases our inner purity and spirit of surrender. Blessed are our sufferings if they bring us clearer knowledge and steadier devotion. The more I see life, the more I understand the divine grace does not necessarily mean removal of our troubles, but it always gives the devotee a wonderful inner poise and strength to face all trials and difficulties, makes him purer and enables him to feel the divine presence which brings an inner peace even in the midst of the greatest sufferings. Real peace is not like sleep, it is a calm state of mind that enables you to remain unmoved in the midst of the troubles and difficulties and be in touch with a vaster reality. People who run away from the difficulties of life weaken themselves more and more. People who constantly seek pleasure and avoid their duties remain stunted. They never attain their full spiritual stature and are unable to utilize the grace that the Lord is ever ready to shower on them. Let us make the best use of the grace that is already showered on us. Let us make the best use of the time and advantages that we have got instead of complaining about lack of time and disadvantages. And in a spirit of surrender, let us strive for God realization. We should strive for more divine grace and more love for the divine than for the paltry things of the world, which only tend to make us forget God and our spiritual destiny. We should always be in a mood to rush towards God. Our next point is karma and divine grace. Certain forms of karma are to be worked out through suffering. So, when the latter comes, we should feel somewhat relieved, for suffering indicates that so much of the burden of karma is reduced. Besides, the helplessness brought about by suffering may be utilized spiritually by practicing self-surrender to the divine all the more. In pain and pleasure, in life and death, the Lord is our own. He is the soul of our souls, the life of our lives. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that these are the taxes we have to pay for living in the body. We have to pay these taxes, sometimes in heavy installments, and then for some time there may be a respite. The master was often heard to say during his last illness, "Let the body feel the pain, but, O my mind, do thou remain in bliss, moved onwards without trying to run too fast. If we try to run fast, we may have to pay for it with compound interest. God realization is certainly the goal, but this has to be reached not merely through spiritual culture, but also through proper and necessary action. What we should by all means avoid is improper and unnecessary action. Hence, we should be careful both about the inner ideal and the outward action. Proceed slowly and steadily, adjusting your karma. Be in tune with the divine within and also be careful about what you do. We must correct ourselves always both on the thought plane and on the plane of action. Most people suffer because of the discrepancy between their spiritual aspiration and the grim reality they have to face in worldly life. This suffering by itself is not an evil. It may even be for one's good, if it acts as an incentive to find an inner spiritual readjustment. One may then gradually feel that one is not really of the world, even if one has to live in the world. In a certain sense, we all get what we deserve. We wish for a thing, we get it, and along with it also the good and the evil, which are inseparably connected with it. We seek some forms of happiness and then, As Swami Vivekananda says, happiness presents itself before man wearing the crown of sorrow on its head. We cannot accept the one without the other. We wish for the satisfaction of some worldly desire. We may get the object of desire, but we get also the trouble associated with it. Our present state is the result of our past as well as our present worldly desires. Let us learn to be as desireless as possible, to adjust ourselves to the circumstances that we ourselves have brought about, and then rise above them. Let us work out our destiny and learn to depend on the divine more and more as we work out our karma. Then the world will become our training ground, and through it we will be able to reach the divine. Then, even if we continue to remain in the world outwardly, we will be no more of it. We will be the Lord's wherever we be. Next point is play of the Divine Mother. Everything is the play of the Divine Mother. She comes to us in different forms, as the teacher and the student, as the friend and the enemy. Let us then play our part as best we can, at the same time witnessing our play with detachment. Whatever we see around us, whatever happens to us, is the manifestation of her sport, her lila, her joy. Sometimes the devotee says, "Mad woman, what are you doing?" When he sees her indulging in one of her pranks, playing with human hearts, producing pain and pleasure. Sometimes we do not find any rhyme or reason in the whole cosmic process. But this whole cosmic process in its madness, its cruelty, its pain and pleasure is but the manifestation of the mad, frolicking spirit of the mother, of the joy she has in her play. We too should enjoy her play and take it as play, performing parts as actors, but knowing that we really have nothing to do with it, that it is all for the sake of the great fun of the game. Many of the songs which Sri Ramakrishna used to sing, they were mostly composed by Ramprasad and a few other poet saints of Bengal, are symbolic representations of the cosmic process. The crude mind of the worldly person takes them in a crude way and thus misses their whole inner meaning. Their symbolism is really marvelous and expresses the truth in a very striking way, as far as the truth can ever be expressed in words. Sri Ramakrishna especially liked a song about the Divine Mother flying kites. We are all kites that the Mother is flying in the sky, and we are tied by separate strings so that we cannot get away. But some very clever kites manage to cut the string and fly away never to return. And then the mother, beside herself with joy, claps her hands, though she herself had kept the kites tied to the string. So, what we have got to do is to cut the string that ties us to the phenomenal world for mother's play. And then we are free and mother rejoices at our freedom. Otherwise, the play will go on indefinitely with all its joys and miseries, fulfillments and frustrations, never to end. All one immense round of mad frolicking scene from the mother's side, and of immense suffering and bondage scene from ours. Brushing completely aside your petty individual will, you must joyfully dance her mad dance. The fun is that when various impulses rise in our mind, we think they rise from ourselves. They are our impulses. They belong to our will. We do not even realize the real nature of our own slavery. When we have got to take part in the great cosmic dance, we should know it is but play and nothing but play. While we are in the depths of our being, only witnesses and have no identity with it. Even our so-called individuality is a manifestation of the cosmic, but we make ourselves miserable by cutting ourselves away from the cosmic principle, the mother, who starts and leads the dance. You see, when you boil potatoes, they too perform a most ludicrous dance inside the pan, and we are just like these potatoes. If they had thoughts, they too would probably imagine that they were dancing out of their own free will, not that they were made to dance. You should try to realize this truth fully. It helps you greatly in advancing along the right line. Our next point is be an instrument in the hands of the divine. You get a glimpse of freedom only when you are in perfect tune with the cosmic reality. Otherwise, what we ordinarily call freedom is the animal freedom of the instincts and not from the instincts. The working of the senses is the unconscious manifestation of the cosmic energy. The more we love that kind of freedom, the more we live in the unconscious and the more bound we become. Instead of living an instinctive life, live a conscious life, a life of intelligence. Freedom of the instincts is license, not freedom at all. The so called free man is actually a slave of his own moods, his instincts. As the whole world is full of such free people, it is getting worse and worse. Wonderful free souls they are, all puppets dangling most ludicrously on the string of the Divine Mother's delusive power. This spiritual aspirant should feel he is an instrument in the hands of the cosmic power. The best attitude is that of an instrument, knowing oneself to be not the doer, not the agent. Let us take an example. There are different clocks, all driven by the same electric energy. If every clock just thinks that it goes by its own strength, it is a serious error. We are all parts of a mighty stream of energy that is working through us. We should always try to be cosmocentric and become as impersonal as possible in everything. This body and mind are instruments of a mighty power. To the extent we are able to become cosmocentric and more impersonal, to that extent we succeed in giving up all ideas of agentship and attain peace. The more we run away from the divine, the more miserable we become. Really speaking, do you keep your body alive, or is it the divine energy that is working through you? You are in dynamic contact with the cosmic forces at different levels of your personality, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. Just as the body is maintained by energy derived from food, so is the soul maintained by cosmic spiritual energy. The moment this energy is withdrawn, you become lifeless, inert. So, never attribute anything to yourself, but learn to attribute everything to the divine energy. Try instead to become a fit channel for the expression of that energy. Develop in yourself this capacity by practicing humility and self surrender. But this needs constant effort. Egotism obstructs the free flow of the energy, cuts us away from the divine source. That is why we suffer. Actually, we are only instruments in the hands of the divine. Don't you remember Swami Vivekananda's experience in Kashmir? While in a dilapidated temple, which bore the marks of Mohammedan vandalism, he said to himself that he would not have allowed that to happen had he been alive then. Suddenly there came to him the voice of the Divine Mother. Am I protecting you, or are you protecting me? Swamiji was a realized soul, and so he could hear the divine voice. Ordinary people should not mistake their own voice for the divine voice, which cannot be so easily heard as people think. Only when our minds are purified and our wills are united with the divine will can we hear the voice. Our whole being must vibrate with divine vibrations before we can hear the voice. And we should note that the voice does not contradict reason but transcends it. In these days, it has become fashionable to hear the inner voice, and most of these cases are of a questionable nature. What is important for us is to strive consciously to connect our little selves with the divine. As long as we remain awake, let us strive for this to the utmost, and when we go to sleep, let us think that the divine power supports us during that period. We constantly repeat, I. But then, when this wonderful I sleeps, who protects it? What keeps the body alive then? Our trouble is we think that this little individuality is an independent entity. No, it is not. It is only a part of an infinite existence. Just as it is possible for us to react to our little self or ego, so it is possible for us to react to our higher self. Just as it is possible for us to react to our individuality, so it is possible for us to react to the principle standing behind it. Just as we can love a human being, so can we love the principle. The love is very different from our human love though. The idea of God as energy or power may appeal to you more than the idea of an impersonal absolute. But we should learn to appreciate that idea also and get established in it. It will become easy if we regard ourselves as a soul and God as the sum total of all souls or the soul of all souls. Sri Ramakrishna used to sing the song, O Mother, all is done after thine own sweet will. Thou art in truth self-willed, Redeemer of mankind. Thou workest thine own work, men only call it theirs. Thou art the moving force, and I the mere machine. The house am I, and thou the spirit dwelling there. I am the chariot, and thou the charioteer. I move along as thou, O Mother, movest me. It is, however, important to note that the idea implied in the above song refers to a high spiritual state, which one attains only after prolonged struggle and self-effort. Only he who has really passed through strenuous self-effort can give himself up and surrender himself wholly and unconditionally at the feet of the divine. All forms of spiritual striving make the mind pure and fit for this total self-surrender, which can be accomplished only after having gone through one's spiritual practice with great perseverance and doggedness. Self-surrender can come only when our wings are dead tired, like those of the bird in Sri Ramakrishna's parable. A bird which was sitting on the mast of a ship did not know that the ship was moving. When it suddenly realized that, it started flying towards the east, west, north, and south, but found only limitless sea everywhere. Finally, when its wings were dead tired, it came back and sat on the mast, allowing itself to be carried by the ship. Only a person who has put forth maximum self-effort can know what true self-surrender is. It is not enough to say simply, it is all his will. Self-surrender is an attitude of mind which one acquires through the consciousness that one's soul is a part of the cosmic soul, and that one's body and mind are instruments of a higher power. True self-surrender comes only after a direct spiritual experience. Our next point is some practical suggestions. Do not make a blueprint of your life. That does not mean you should not prepare a general plan. Plan your future course in a general way, but then leave everything to the Lord. Let Him make you do what He likes. Let us wish strongly for spiritual progress and spiritual experience, but let us leave the details to the divine. As we do not always see things clearly, we cannot but think about our future and make plans. But all these are to be ultimately left to the divine. We should gradually learn to be in tune with the divine and follow the divine will. If we sincerely persist in this, we will come to a stage when our whole being will be in tune with the divine. Remember this, if one practices complete self-surrender, one cannot take any wrong step. People often glibly say, I have left everything to God, and then they go and do as they please. A man who is attached to the objects of the world or to his own desires and prejudices cannot think of self-surrender. We should always note that without a certain minimum of detachment, self-surrender is impossible. For complete self-surrender, complete detachment is necessary. One who is poor should not wish for more than is necessary. One who is rich should replace the sense of possession with that of trusteeship, and then make the best use of what the divine gives to one. This is true not only of material possessions, but also of intellectual resources and even spiritual blessings. Whatever you have, musical talent, efficiency in work, intellectual ideas, love, everything must be considered as a gift from God to be passed on to others. You know the story of Job in the Old Testament. He lost everything he had, but only said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away." Blessed be the name of the Lord. We should give to deserving people whatever we can, but we should exercise great care even in making gifts, whatever they may be. Do not give things away indiscriminately in the name of self-surrender. The true devotee gets the right direction at the right time about how, when, and to whom gifts are to be given. You need not worry so much about attaining calmness just now. There are two types of calmness, egocentric and cosmocentric. Some people appear to be calm because of their lack of love or sympathy for others. They are not bothered about other people's sufferings and appear to be balanced and strong, but they collapse when something happens to themselves. It is better not to have this type of calmness. The cosmocentric calmness comes as a result of self-surrender to the divine. By coming in touch with Him, only when we are established in the universal consciousness can we attain real calmness and balance under all circumstances. Do not weaken yourself by being too self-critical. People go on complaining about their life because they allow the causes of their complaints to continue. Unless we make an inner change, unless we overhaul our mind, it will go on giving troubles to us. Do you know Sri Ramakrishna's parable of the pet dog? A dog had been so much fondled in the beginning that it had made a habit of jumping onto its master's body. Later on, the master wanted to control this, but the dog would not obey. Even when it was bitten, it tried to jump onto the master's body. Our mind is like that dog. It has been pampered so long that it is difficult to control it and surrender it at the feet of the Lord. But through repeated practice, we have got to make the mind surrender itself to God. First of all, bring about a transformation in your own life, at least to some extent through regular sadhana, and then take up the ideal of work and worship. Only you should see that you do not take up more work than you can joyfully do. In the beginning, it is not possible to maintain constant remembrance of the Lord. So, offer all that you do to Him at the beginning and at the end of the work, and if possible, while you are engaged in work. Work becomes mechanical only when you forget the goal of your life, when you forget that whatever you do is a means to realizing God. It is no use working like a machine. The trouble with our work is not so much with the quantity of work as with its quality. That is the way we do it. It is our inability to do work in a spirit of dedication to God that is the main obstacle to doing work as a spiritual discipline. And there can never be any dedication unless the goal of God realization is constantly kept in view. Obedience to superiors is a test of our surrender to God, but the person who says that in obeying his superiors he has to sacrifice everything, including his spiritual aspiration and practice, has not understood the spirit of surrender. As we practice self-surrender to God, our ego is not so much destroyed as transmuted. The individual consciousness expands and finds a place for everybody within it, superiors, juniors, and equals. True self-surrender endows a person with a higher wisdom and dignity that prevents other people from taking advantage of him. Self-surrender does not mean you have to behave like fools. Once upon a time, there was a great scholar. His wife one day had to go somewhere, and she asked him to boil lentils on the stove before she returned. Now, as the cooking proceeded, the lentils started frothing up and the soup started spilling out of the vessel. The scholar immediately began to pray to God. His wife later on came, saw the mess the man had created, and asked him what he had done. She then scolded him, "You fool, could you not pour a little oil on the lentils? When we pray to God, we should pray for the wisdom to distinguish truth from falsehood, the good from the bad, the right from the wrong. Let us work as best we can with the understanding which He has already given us, and as we proceed, He will fill us more and more." It is a great bondage to depend too much on outside help and seek advice from others too often. The more you turn to the inner guide, the more free you become. Have infinite trust in the divine and go on with the duties of your life heroically. Let the hands be busy with work and the mind occupied with thoughts of the divine. If you have to do intellectual work and keep your mind engaged in worldly thoughts, then fix your heart, the will, on the Lord firmly. Surrender your ego to the divine. Work and worship must go hand in hand. Our ideal is to transmute work also into worship, but it can be realized only through constant practice in the course of time. In order to succeed in this, you have to maintain something of the prayerful and meditative mood while doing your work. It does not matter if you do not succeed always. Let these failures be stepping stones to success. With a part of the mind, we have to think of the Lord, while with the other part, we have to attend to the duties of life, noticing, of course, what we are doing, and offering the fruits of the work to the divine. All this is no doubt difficult, but let us try again and again. Don't you know Sri Ramakrishna's parable of the woman who prepares flattened rice? With one hand, she has to turn the grain in the machine. With the other, she has to nurse her baby, all the while talking to friends and bargaining with customers. Something of that dexterity must be brought into our spiritual striving. You know the well-known song of Shankara, wherein he says, "Whatever I do, O Lord, is thy worship." This attitude is easy when you love work. If you really dislike the work you have got to do because of some intrinsic defect in it, then please tell the Lord about your difficulties and about the fact that you are doing it only because of the pressure of circumstances. If you so wish, you may request Him to take it away from you and give something better. He will surely fulfill your wish if it is for your own good. Otherwise, you should know that it is good for you to continue with the old work, in which case you may find unexpected benefits from the very work which you disliked. I am not quite sure if Sri Ramakrishna gives us blows or troubles and tribulations are the results of the working out of our karma. So, instead of blaming the Lord, let us profit by our experiences, however bitter they are, get dispassion more and more, and hold on to the Lord always. He is not only witnessing our trials, but also is ready to help us out of them. The Lord has brought you into close contact with His spiritual current. Follow that current and maintain the contact. In due course, you will feel the divine presence always within you, whether you sit quiet or work hard. Work and worship must go hand in hand, and work done in the right spirit is acceptable to the divine as much as devoted worship consisting of prayer, meditation, etc. My teacher, Swami Brahmananda, gave me this instruction: before you begin to work, remember the Lord and offer salutations to Him. Do the same at intervals in the course of the work, and also after you finish it. Divine grace may not necessarily remove all our physical miseries and sorrows, but if we have the grace, we will be able to pass through the fiery ordeal of life successfully, burning the dross in us and attaining inner purity, and also develop greater resignation to the divine will. Blessed are our sufferings, then, if they bring us clearer knowledge and steadier devotion. Take the divine name, think of the indwelling spirit, feel the holy presence, surrendering your will to His, and be at peace. Pray to the Lord for bringing new light and strength to your mind and heart. What else can you do but take things as they are and try to do your best, whether you know it or not? Your past, present, and future rest with the Lord. The best course for us is to play our part as well as we can and surrender ourselves to Him as much as possible. Everyone has to pass through periods of great uncertainty. Whenever you feel anxious for some reason or other, repeat the name of the Lord, think of Him, and practice self-surrender. I am sure this method will bring you great strength and peace in due course. It is only a joy to serve the Lord's cause. I am not worried about the future, since I know that the past, the present, and the future rest in Him. The best thing we can do is to remember Him and surrender ourselves to Him and be absorbed in His infinite presence, love, and bliss. Offer all the fruits of your labor to Him who dwells in your heart and guides your destiny, and be at peace. Even if you think that the whole world has forsaken you, know it for certain that the Lord is there with you and within you. So, pray to the Divine Lord to come to your aid and enlighten your path. In the midst of the loneliness of your life, go on praying to Him for light and guidance, and try to feel His divine presence even in the midst of trials and difficulties. The Lord will grant you all the strength and courage you need. If you wish to have peace of mind, do not expect anything from anyone. If you get something, be thankful. If not, thank God. And know in your heart of hearts that the Lord alone is your own, is the soul of your soul. He cannot leave you, nor you Him. Success in an undertaking does not just depend on our endeavor alone. There are also other factors which combine to make success possible. However, even when our efforts end in an objective failure, there will be a subjective success if we have worked hard in the proper spirit. Having his eye on this inner success, Bhagavan Sri Krishna has said, to work alone ye have the right, but not to the fruits thereof. The great task in spiritual life, as in all other walks of life, is to know where we stand in relation to the reality and face the problems boldly. Along with that, we must try to improve ourselves. If we can bring about a change for the better in the environment, well and good. Otherwise, we have to play our parts as best we can in the restricted situation in which we are placed. It is sheer cowardice to try to run away from life and think of taking shelter in death. It is like falling from the frying pan into the fire, and no sane person should think of it. The great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna have taught us that the spiritual seeker should not be just an automaton, always eager to be guided by someone else. We must learn to acquire conscious control over our personality, and through service, prayer, and self-surrender, try to be in tune with the divine will and follow its bindings with devotion and steadfastness. I have known there is such a thing as the divine will, which works through the human will for one's own good and that of others. Through prayer, japa, meditation, and puja, we have to conduct that. Strive to your utmost by following your higher moral sense, by fulfilling your duties in a spirit of detachment and worship, and by doing your spiritual practice with regularity and devotion. All those who have come under the influence of the divine power manifest in this age in Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother are fortunate. As you unfurl your shell, you will catch more and more of the breeze of divine grace that is constantly blowing. You know the analogy of the salt doll which wanted to fathom the depth of the ocean and got dissolved. It happens only in the case of the doll of pure salt, but not of the doll of sand or of the doll made of plenty of salt and sand. In all of us, both salt and sand are there. In order to practice absolute self-surrender, the sand is to be eliminated or transformed into salt. Our ego, with its pride and innumerable desires, cannot be transmuted easily, but attempts are to be made little by little so that eventually the sand is removed. Until then, we have to be like the baby monkey clinging to its mother and follow the instruction of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Remember me and fight the battle of life. When the salt nature asserts itself, a great surge of love overpowers us and self-surrender becomes easy for the time being. But then, maybe immediately afterwards, the sand nature which is predominant becomes strong and complete self-surrender becomes an impossibility. At that time, we should not worry, but should try to remain calm. Along with our egocentric activity, we should try to surrender as much as we can to the divine will. In each one of us, double, sometimes triple personalities exist, and these create no end of conflicts. One nature wages war against another and makes the confusion worse confounded. Instead of allowing ourselves to be completely upset, we have to practice japa dhyana, remembering the Lord even when we are actively engaged in our duties and offering the fruits of all our labors to Him. The practice of self-surrender passes through three stages. First, whether it is spiritual practice or performance of duties, at first we do them in an egocentric way. Secondly, next we learn to offer the fruits of our work to the Divine Spirit. Thirdly, in the last stage, we perform everything for pleasing the Lord. As our mind becomes purer, we feel the Divine Presence, and it is only then that we feel the Lord is like the operator and we are like machines. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.